Hello and welcome to this edition of Africa Today, a program which gives an in-depth analysis on news making headlines in Africa. Today, we are looking into the political situation in Tunisia, the birthplace of the Arab Spring, and we are asking, why is Tunisia restless despite a peaceful transition to democracy? In this edition, we are also highlighting Britain's refusal to end its colonial rule in Chagos Archipelago and asking, why has London rejected a United Nations resolution to hand over the strategic islands back to Mauritius? I'm your host, Mubarak Kenya. Stay with us.
Restless Tunisia. Tunisia is the birthplace of the Islamic Awakening movement, also known as the Arab Spring. The 2011 popular revolt swept autocrats from power in North Africa and the West Asia region. Tunisia remains the only country to achieve a peaceful transition to democracy following the people's uprisings across the region. However, this has not been without challenges.
In a surprise move, during October's presidential elections, political outsider Kais Saied won the election by a landslide. He plans to alter the Tunisian political system by decentralizing its power structures and introducing more direct democracy.
Newly elected President Kais Saied is popular among the educated youth across Tunisia. Belonging to a middle-class family, his name has remained clean compared to many other prominent politicians or candidates in the country.
Thousands of Said's supporters celebrating the man who they say can keep alive the spirit of the 2011 revolution. He campaigned for radical decentralization and pledged to build a democracy that all Tunisians, including the youth, can have a say in.
On the international scene, President Saied has said that normalization of ties with the Israeli regime is tantamount to high treason. He has also slammed U.S. President Donald Trump's so-called deal of the century on Palestine, terming it the injustice of the century. The Tunisian president categorically stated that Palestine is not an orchard to be a subject of a deal.
Now, for more analysis on the situation in Tunisia, we are joined by Sami Hamdi, the son of a Tunisian politician and presidential candidate, Mohamed Al-Hashimi Al-Hamdi. Al-Hamdi is also the editor-in-chief of the International Interest and also an experienced geopolitical risk consultant with extensive experience in the Middle East and the North Africa region. Our first question, Mr. Al-Hamdi, as someone closely following the Tunisian politics, were you surprised by the results of the presidential elections?
I think it was clear that the Tunisians, at least in the presidential election, wanted to go into another direction. There was a lot of dissatisfaction with regards to the traditional politics. By traditional, I mean the traditional politics from 2011, but also because Tunisians still believe that the president is the leader of the nation, insofar as perhaps they have the most authority.
Despite the newly elected Tunisian president Kais Saied being popular with the youth and even holding meetings with young people from unemployed and poverty-stricken regions, he has apparently not been able to prevent protests, which continue to be reported in several parts across the country. Why is that so?
The way that they're going to sell it, the government policy as it is now, means the farmers are going to lose out. So there have been huge protests in places like Jelma, in Sidi Bouzid, in Qasreen, in Qayrawan and the like. But the government has no vision to deal with this. It has no idea how it's going to deal with these issues. And it still believes that austerity is the key. So they're asking poor people to be patient while the rich are simply continuing to lobby the parties for their own interests. So it's very difficult to see how any solution is going to be brought about by the current state of the political system.
During the October parliamentary elections, Ennahda Islamist Party came first by winning 52 of 217 seats. This means that the party will have a major role in a coalition government. Tunisian politicians have been unable to form a new government since the parliamentary elections, while the country continues to face major economic challenges. Meanwhile, Tunisian Prime Minister-designate Elias Fakhfakh has declared that he is excluding Ghal Tunis, the party of defeated presidential candidate Nabil Gharwi and the second-largest party in parliament, from his planned government. He says Gharwi's party is not aligned with the values of the revolution that overthrew Ben Ali. However, the leader of Ennahda, Rashid Ghannouchi, who is also the Speaker of Parliament, has maintained that if Khaled Tunis is excluded, the government will not win a vote of confidence in Parliament. Will the opposing stances by Prime Minister-designate and the Parliament Speaker further worsen the political stalemate in Tunisia and maybe lead to a snap election?
There is this sort of battle for legitimacy. Who is more legitimate? The Parliament, which is sovereign on the Constitution, or the President's candidate to be Prime Minister Ilyas al-Fakhfakh, who claims that he wields the support of 2.5 million votes. Of course, from Ennahda's perspective, they will say that at least more than 1 million of those votes are party votes, are votes that came also to the parliament, implying that Kais Saied is not as popular as everybody makes him out to be, and that the only reason he secured 2.5 million votes is because essentially Tunisians were put between a rock and a hard place. In other words, they choose somebody who was termed as a mafiosi, Nabil Qaroui, or the outsider Kais Saied, and people voted for Kais Saied because they didn't like Nabil Qaroui, not because they like Kais Saied. This is of course the argument that a lot of the parties are using, and this is why there is this continued stalemate. It's this question of legitimacy.
The decision by President Said to give Fakhfakh the mandate to form a government has apparently put him on a collision course with Ennahda, which wants to reassert itself as the supreme political force in Tunisia. Ennahda leaders had previously ruled out any alliance with Khaled Tunis, but Ghannouchi and Ennahda have now changed this approach and now oppose Fakhfakh's decision to exclude Khaled Tunis in the government. Why has Ennahda changed its previous stance of opposing Khaled Tunis and now fully backs the party to be part of the new coalition government in Tunisia?
I think initially when Ennahda opposed joining them for a deal, I think as the prospect of early elections comes, Ennahda is going to consider more and more a deal with Khaled Tunis. Why? Because nobody wants early elections. Nobody in the parliament wants early elections. It was a fiercely contested battle, and they are worried that the popular anger is being directed at the members of parliament for not forming a government, and there is a fear that if they go to new elections, that all of the parties will lose seats. None of the parliamentary members of parliament want to lose their seats, so I think Ennahda is preparing the way for an alliance with Khaled Tunis to allow Fakhfakh to form his government. They will allow the government to be formed to avoid early elections, but they know that this government will eventually collapse, but at least it buys them time and makes sure that they don't go back to the ballot boxes.
Kais Saied defeated media tycoon Nabil Qaroui, who is known for his close relationship with political and business circles in France. And while it cannot be expected that Saied will take a position directly against France, do you expect France to have considerable influence in Tunisia?
I think Mohamed Abu, we have to remember during the elections, all of the parties except one went to visit the French ambassador in the embassy to call upon him, to greet him and speak with him and discuss with him certain affairs. The French ambassador has been involved in forming the government in the past through backdoor negotiations, through back channels. So France continues to wield considerable influence, not necessarily because the president wants it, but because the parties still have an inferiority complex towards France and still believe that France is the mother through which they need to appease in order to secure power.
Rival Arab countries are competing to gain influence in Tunisia. Saudi king congratulated Rashid Ghannouchi on his election as Speaker of Tunisian Parliament. Meanwhile, Saudi's rival Qatar recently announced a major investment in the tourism sector aimed at boosting the Tunisian economy. Will Tunisia maintain what is now perceived as a neutral role as far as Persian Gulf rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Qatar is concerned?
I think yes. I don't think Tunisia has much of an influence over the Saudi-Qatari rivalry. I think between 2011 and 2016, there was fierce rivalry between the Qataris and the Emiratis. The UAE were backing Sibsi, and the Qataris were backing Marzoughi and the Nahda. But I think given that Qatar is no longer as powerful as it was before, given that the UAE now is a major power in Libya and Egypt and Sudan, given that Saudi Arabia now is looking to reconcile with Qatar and Qatar is trying to reconcile with Saudi Arabia, I think those influences will be a bit less in Tunisia now. And I don't think Tunisia is of such strategic importance like Egypt or Libya or Iraq or Syria.
And now in this segment of our program, my colleague Shilan Lima will be bringing you news and events from across Africa.
Thank you, Mr. Henia. Hello and welcome to this part of the program. It's Shilan Lima bringing you news from Africa. Let's start with the war of hunger in Africa. In a bid to tap into Africa's agricultural potential and spearhead a green revolution, various organizations are coming into play. Just to name a few, the United Methodist Committee on Relief in South Sudan is supporting farmers by providing farming tools and seeds, which have been able to assist over 7,000 farmers record high yields. The Research Center for Plant Metabolomics at the University of Johannesburg in South Africa is building on a report on the importance of priming plants with friendly bacteria to make them more resistant to disease and, in turn, survive harsh climate changes. In Kenya, iAgriBiz Africa is working to recruit more people to join small-scale farming through educating the public about agriculture and smart farming methods. And in Ghana, Aquamea Drone Tech Limited is renting out drones to be used in spraying pesticides in farming projects, a rising digitalized method slowly growing in popularity. In the field of literary arts, Nancy Sumari, a social entrepreneur from Tanzania, authored yet another children's book. Haki, a Swahili term meaning rights, is dedicated to children in Africa, meant to educate them on their human rights. The book has various illustrative images to make it easier for the young readers to understand. In related news, Logobo, a French photographer, will be launching a documentary in support of his illustrated book, Lions. In the book, he showcases breathtaking black and white photographic images of the African lion, which he took on a 17-year-long journey through the African continent. The images portray the lion in all its character and emotions and seeks to make the viewers aware that it is one of the endangered species in the world and thus encourage the importance to put in efforts to conserve nature. Do you agree to take a look into the world of economy? I would love to. A research analysis showed that in the Harvard Business Review showed a different depiction of the African economy contrary to recent reports by the World Bank and the IMF. The research focused on 6 countries picked from different regions of the continent, that is Egypt, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, and South Africa, showing that technology could indeed be the antidote to poverty and in turn uplifting their economies. On to our news flash series, I present to you 5 natural splendors of the motherland. 1. Nile River, the longest river in the world. It flows through 11 countries and is said to have given rise to the ancient Egyptian and Sudanese civilizations. 2. Namib Desert, the oldest desert in the world, said to be approximately 55 million years old. 3. The Okavango Delta, the largest inland delta in the world. 4. The Ngorongoro Crater, the world's largest inactive and still intact volcanic caldera. It's a wildlife sanctuary and often called Africa's Garden of Eden. And finally, 5. The Serengeti Migration. It's the largest and longest overland migration in the world that happens annually. Quite a sight to behold. What other natural wonders lie in the continent? Send in pictures from where you live or where you have traveled to, and we will show them right here in our program. Also, interact with us on our social media pages, share your thoughts and your comments on the program. Do stay tuned. We will be back soon.
Britain clings to Chagos.
The African Union recently urged Britain to withdraw from the Chagos Islands and end its colonial administration. Last May, the United Nations member states voted overwhelmingly to demand that the UK hand over control of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius as soon as possible. The UN condemned Britain's occupation of the Chagos Islands and endorsed February's non-binding ruling by the International Court of Justice, calling on the UK to relinquish its hold on the territory by the 22nd of November 2019.
On draft resolution A/73/L84 revision 1 entitled advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice on the legal consequences of the separation of the Chagos Archipelago from Mauritius in 1965. Will all delegations confirm that the votes are accurately reflected on the screen?
The result of the vote is as follows. In favor of the resolution, 116. Against, 6. Abstentions, 56. Therefore, draft resolution A/73/L84 revision 1 is adopted.
A total of 116 countries voted in favor of a non-binding UN resolution presented by African countries that urged Britain to withdraw its colonial administration from the Chagos Islands within 6 months. Only the US, Hungary, the Israeli regime, Australia, and the Maldives supported Britain, reflecting Britain's diplomatic isolation and the diminished global stature of the US. The Diego Garcia military base in Chagos Archipelago is used by the US as a launching pad for its criminal operations in the Middle East. For now, the UK might possibly be searching for reassurance in the fact that the ICJ ruling is not binding and no immediate sanctions or adverse actions will be taken against it. Britain's expressed policy that it will protect its interests at any cost, even at the expense of international law and fundamental human rights, is a clear pointer of a colonial mentality and discrimination that should have no place in the 21st century. In an address to the 74th session of the UN General Assembly, the Mauritian president said that he expects Britain to respect the decision by the ICJ.
Mr. President, we therefore expect that, given its commitment to the rule of law and respect for the International Court of Justice and the United Nations, the United Kingdom will give effect to the findings of the advisory opinion and withdraw its administration from the Chagos Archipelago unconditionally by the 22nd November 2019, as requested by the General Assembly.
Now, for more analysis on this, we are joined by Louis-Olivier Bancolt, a Chagosian activist who is the leader of the Chagos refugee group. Now, what is your take on Britain's refusal to allow the Chagos Islands to be reunified with Mauritius or the islanders to return to their homes?
According to me and to everyone, it's a very bad faith from British government side, because if you form parts of an organization which is recognized worldwide, such as United Nations, you should obey, you should abide to the rules of United Nations.
Britain appears determined to hold on to its remaining 14 colonial possessions and has therefore rejected the ruling by the International Court of Justice and the United Nations order to stop the colonization of Chagos Islands. Britain fears claims from the Mauritian government for compensation and the implications for other sovereignty disputes, including with Spain over Gibraltar and Argentina over the Malvinas. The ICJ ruling on Chagos Islands is not binding, and thus Britain can decide to ignore it. Does this imply that the international justice system is still serving imperialist forces?
Oh, according to me, even if the advisory opinion is not binding, it's a sign that we should respect, because we have in all 14 judges who condemn what Britain did towards Chagosian and toward Mauritius. First of all, there was a violation of Charter of Human Rights of United Nations. Secondly, there is a violation of fundamental rights, human rights, what they did with Chagosian.
The Chagos Islands are of geostrategic significance. Britain has leased Diego Garcia, the largest island in the Indian Ocean archipelago, to the United States. The U.S. uses the site to house one of its largest air bases with around 4,000 U.S. troops as well as British troops. Now, it is quite ironic that the US is using the colonized island to attack other countries in the name of establishing democracy. Now, what's your take on this?
Oh, I think that the responsibility should be shared between the two governments who are two superpowers. Firstly, the United Kingdom, and secondly, the United States. You know, if you really form part of United Nations, you want to give example to other countries. Why not start it by yourself? You need to have respect for your own institution, for all the recognized organizations which you form parts, to start by respecting their rulings.
The African Union urged the UK to comply with the United Nations resolution calling for it to withdraw from the Chagos archipelago in the Indian Ocean, which is considered part of Mauritius. The British government is yet to be charged for numerous crimes it committed against Chagosians. For more than 5 decades, Britain has carried out one crime after another against the indigenous people of Chagos. How can they get justice for crimes perpetrated by Britain?
Oh, you know, as I said always, what UK did with the Chagosian is a crime against humanity. You just take the example. UK government controls about 13 countries. As I said, is British overseas territories. If you look out at all those 13 countries, including St. Helena, including Falkland, including Pitcairn and others, all those countries who are under the control of British government, they all have a budget. They all get access to national health services. They all get a better treatment. Why not Chagosian? And this is why we say it's a sense of racism. Is it because we are black people coming from Africa?
Britain continues its illegal and colonial occupation of Chagos Islands. Now, considering the fact that the International Court of Justice has ruled in your favor and you have the backing of the United Nations and the African Union, do you plan to return home?
We are planning. We are Chagosian, together with Mauritius, together with all countries who support Mauritius and the Chagosian, we will go on Chagos. With many of us who are still alive, with one of the most important documents that every human being has, that is our birth certificate. We will see what will be the position of the UK government when we will arrive on our birthplace.
And that's it for this edition of Africa Today. Thank you for joining us. From me, Mubarak Kenya, and my team, it's goodbye. Join us in our next edition for more analysis, news, and views from across Africa, the rising continent.